Who will stand when the Emperor's light falters and the universe itself weeps for the living? The chronicle begins in a darkness older than memory, where the bones of countless worlds groan under the weight of eternity. Across the Imperium, whispered tales speak of a regiment forged in shadows, yet baptized in the fire of purity, the Lucifer Blacks. Clad in armor as black as void, their eyes burn with a faith untouched by decay, a loyalty unbroken even when starships fall and planets bleed. They are the echo of humanity's last defiance, marching into the skeletal remains of the battlefield with the ghosts of fallen heroes in step. Each step is a hymn to the Emperor, each shot a prayer that the galaxy might yet endure. And yet, their origins are hidden, recorded only in fragments, buried within vaults the Adeptus Archivum dares not open. The Lucifer Blacks arose during the epoch of the Tyrant Wars, when Xenos empires encroached upon Imperial worlds, and the sky itself seemed to weep acid rain upon the faithful. Their recruitment was clandestine, taking men from death's very threshold, souls tempered in despair, forged into instruments of absolute obedience. No legion could claim them, for they answered solely to the edicts of a cryptic Lord Captain whose visage is a mask of carved obsidian. Their training was whispered in the language of angels and demons alike, a dialect of war that bends flesh, steel, and spirit. On battlefields strewn with shattered titans, the Lucifer Blacks emerge, not as men, but as myth incarnate. Enemy lines crack before their discipline. Traitor warbands fall to their tactical genius. Yet each victory leaves a scar on the soul, for the regiment consumes itself in righteous fury, leaving no trace of personal glory, only the cold, unyielding obedience to the Emperor's hidden will. Their armory is as enigmatic as their masters. They wield guns etched with prayers older than the Imperium, bolters that hum with a resonance between the material and the immaterial, whispering warnings to those who would betray the Emperor. Flak and carapace meld seamlessly with relics of alien tech captured, purified, and repurposed. Each weapon is a cathedral, each ordnance a sermon of fire. Yet their greatest weapon is silence, for the Lucifer Blacks strike without herald, leaving only the evidence of annihilation, ash, ruin, and the faint imprint of footsteps none dare trace. Observers speak of shadows moving independently, of squads appearing as if born from the ground itself. Within the annals of the Inquisition, the regiment is referenced sparingly, a footnote of awe and fear, for it is said that to witness them unbidden is to glimpse the Emperor's judgment before it descends. On the world of Dathomir, where a rebellion festered under the sun of a dying star, the Lucifer Blacks made their first canonical appearance. The planet's cities were tombs of smoke and iron, and traitors believed themselves safe behind walls of fear. Yet the regiment arrived on the wings of the void, descending in silence as though the darkness itself conspired with them. No cries of warning, no signal flares, only the cold precision of death as a calculus of faith. Entire regiments of rebels vanished in hours, leaving behind only the echoing hymn of their fall. Scholars who later attempted to reconstruct the battle speak of unnatural coordination, of squads communicating without words, and of a captain whose commands were obeyed before utterance. Dathomir became legend, a cautionary tale for those who questioned the Emperor's will, a place where the presence of the Lucifer Blacks turned terror into scripture. The regiment's campaigns are countless, spanning sectors where Imperial Guard formations faltered. They are deployed in the gravest of crises, worlds overrun by chaos, Xenos invasions that crush the defenseless, rebellions that poison loyal hearts. But their victories are never lauded. Their names are often erased, as though the Imperium itself fears the implications of power unbounded by bureaucracy. Some whisper that the Lucifer Blacks are not truly human, but a gestalt of faith and genetic perfection, crafted in secret during the dark age of technology. Others claim they are the Emperor's eyes and fists, ensuring that no command falters and no sin survives. Each sortie they undertake leaves worlds scarred yet purified, a paradox of destruction and devotion. And when they withdraw, nothing remains but silence, ash, and the unnerving sense that fate itself has shifted in favor of the black. In the heart of a shattered void station orbiting the corpse world Vera, the Lucifer Blacks faced a Xenos host the size of moons. Reports claim the station's orbit trembled as bolter fire met clawed fury. Entire alien battalions disintegrated under precise volleys, their psychic screams feeding back into the void as if the galaxy itself recoiled. Yet the true terror lay in the regiment's strategy. Squads divided, reformed, and merged like a living organism, each unit knowing instinctively the movements of the other. Commanders observing from behind reinforced shields saw miracles and madness intertwine, unable to distinguish divine intervention from supreme tactical genius. And when the last alien fell, the Lucifer Blacks vanished as suddenly as they arrived, leaving only empty corridors echoing with prayers sung in languages long dead. Analysts of the Ordo Militaris still argue whether such perfection is natural or a glimpse of an emperor's plan made flesh. Their enemies speak in hushed tones of a figure called Lord Captain Ignis, a commander whose presence bends reality on the battlefield. Clad in carapace blacker than space, he carries a sword that absorbs light, a blade said to be forged in the heart of a dying star. Eyewitnesses recount seeing him stand amidst fire and plasma, unscathed, directing squads with silent gestures. Some claim he speaks directly to the Emperor, bypassing mortal comprehension, issuing orders that preempt enemy action by minutes or hours. Legends suggest that, if he falls, the regiment disperses like smoke, only to reassemble under new eyes, for the Lucifer Blacks' identity is not bound to flesh alone, but to an unbroken will. Across hundreds of campaigns, no enemy has discerned his weakness, no historian has captured his visage in entirety, and no traitor has lived to tell the story. Despite their prowess, rumors linger that the regiment carries a terrible curse. Witnesses speak of soldiers who vanish after missions, their souls taken by the Emperor, or perhaps by the war itself. Others recount that entire battlefields bear whispers of madness. Survivors of encounters remember conversations that never happened. Orders shouted that no one gave, shadows moving independently. These phenomena hint at the cost of their perfection, the unseen toll of existing as instruments of divine judgment. Some theorize that the Lucifer Blacks' loyalty is absolute because their memories are fragmented, their humanity suppressed to prevent hesitation. Each victory thus preserves the Imperium, but erodes the very essence of those who fight for it. Scholars debate whether such sacrifices are holy or heretical, for the regiment's deeds straddle the line between salvation and abomination. The Lucifer Blacks' most mysterious engagement remains the Siege of Korath Prime, where chaos cults had carved the planet into labyrinthine slaughter fields. When Imperial reinforcements failed, the regiment was dispatched through hidden warp corridors, appearing behind enemy lines. Witnesses describe impossible feats, entire fortresses falling with a single coordinated strike, chaos sorcerers obliterated in unison, and squads moving through walls as if reality itself were plastic. Korath Prime burned and bled, yet emerged loyal. Analysts remain confounded, as no surviving records fully explain how the regiment achieved its objective. The campaign became a testament to the regiment's method, silence, precision, and the relentless imposition of the Emperor's will. But in the aftermath, strange phenomena occurred. Warp tremors, ghostly apparitions of the dead, and whispers in the void suggesting that Korath Prime's salvation may have exacted a cost that humanity has yet to reckon. Legends claim the regiment maintains a secret archive, a record of every engagement, every soul saved and lost, every sin punished. Hidden beneath layers of bureaucracy and secrecy, the archive is said to pulse with the collective consciousness of the Lucifer Blacks. Some acolytes insist it is alive, aware, and capable of influencing the regiment's actions. Only initiates of the highest rank may consult it, and even then, the truths revealed are fragments, incomplete, and cryptic. It is whispered that the archive contains knowledge forbidden even to the High Lords of Terra, for the wisdom it holds could unmake worlds if misapplied. The Imperium tolerates these shadows because the regiment's success ensures survival. Yet, every revelation, every chronicle within the archive hints at a terrifying question. What becomes of humanity when its guardians are more than human, when obedience eclipses morality? Across the galaxy, the Emperor's light flickers, and yet the Lucifer Blacks endure. Their campaigns remain unbroken, their loyalty absolute, and their legend untouchable. Worlds know fear, Xenos taste death, and traitors remember the black armor before they vanish. Yet even in triumph, there are signs of fracture. Soldiers whisper to ghosts, commanders dream in alien tongues, and prayers return with echoes not their own. Faith and dread entwine, suggesting that even this most elite regiment may serve a destiny not of their choosing. Somewhere in the void, beyond the reach of historians and even the Adeptus Terra, a movement unseen stirs, a question unresolved, a shadow waiting. The Lucifer Blacks march forward, inexorable, carrying the weight of the Imperium, the silence of the dead, and a secret that may yet unmake the galaxy. The chronicle closes not with an answer, but a lingering unease. In the aftermath of countless battles, in the ashes of destroyed civilizations, a single constant remains: the presence of the Lucifer Blacks. Observers swear that when they appear, the air thickens, stars dim, and destiny itself pauses in reverence. Yet, on Korath Prime and other forgotten worlds, survivors report fragments of visions, corridors folding upon themselves, whispers of futures undone, and shadows of soldiers who do not exist. Perhaps the regiment is humanity's savior, or perhaps its instrument of oblivion. The final words of ancient scribes fade into silence. The Emperor watches the stars bleed and the Lucifer Blacks wait. For what? No chronicle can say. And in that pause, the universe trembles, hinting at truths that may never be revealed, leaving a quiet but persistent dread lingering in the void. The world exhaled smoke and ash as if grieving its own survival. Beneath shattered spires and skies bruised with warp storms, the faithful marched, their devotion brittle as cracked ceramite. Priests muttered forbidden litanies beneath the hollow gaze of statues whose faces had long since eroded to masks of despair. In the streets, soldiers whispered of victories that smelled of death, of planets saved yet forever defiled. Loyalty and fear entwined in their hearts, and doubt spread like mold in the corners of their minds. Even the Emperor's light, though eternal, flickered against the horizon, refracted through the smoke of 1,000 burned worlds. Among the ruins, the Lucifer Blacks moved silently, their presence both assurance and omen. Yet in their eyes, observers sometimes glimpsed questions they dare not ask aloud, of the purpose of obedience, of the cost of triumph, and of whether salvation could exist when delivered by such unyielding hands. The ecclesiarchy convened in secret, beneath vaults blackened by the prayers of 1,000,000 departed souls. Cardinals spoke in murmurs that tasted of fear and ambition, debating whether obedience justified the cruelties required to maintain the Imperium. Some argued for mercy, citing the Emperor's compassion, while others demanded unflinching purges, invoking the necessity of blood for the preservation of mankind. Amid the flickering torchlight, the walls seemed to pulse with whispers, as if the dead themselves argued over the fate of those who survived. The Lucifer Blacks were discussed carefully, in terms both reverent and wary. Tales of their triumphs were embroidered with hints of unease, vanishing soldiers, whispers in alien tongues, the faintest tremor of prescience in their commander's eyes. A tension coiled in the air, fragile yet unyielding, suggesting that the instruments of salvation might also be harbingers of corruption, and that the line between faith and heresy was thinner than any man dared admit. On the field of Gethys V, where the soil was spattered with molten promethium, squads of conscripts trembled beneath banners soaked in smoke and blood. They looked to their officers for guidance, only to see hesitation flicker in eyes hardened by years of futility. Morale fractured as rumors of unseen enemies spread, and among the whispered fears was the presence of the Lucifer Blacks themselves. Soldiers described shadows moving independently, squads that appeared where no path existed, and weapons that seemed to fire not at targets, but at destiny itself. In the cathedrals, priests cataloged these occurrences with trembling hands, recording each phenomenon with prayers and curses entwined. Doubt seeped into hearts already weary from ceaseless war. Men began to ask questions they had been taught to silence. If salvation demands such unnatural obedience, if righteousness leaves scars on the soul, then what is the true cost of faith in the dying age of the galaxy? On the bridge of a shattered cruiser orbiting a dying sun, an inquisitor reviewed reports with a mind sharpened by suspicion. Lines of strategy and casualty formed a tapestry of triumph, yet threads of uncertainty wove through every page. It was noted that the Lucifer Blacks had been deployed without sanction from the High Lords, their movements guided by an unknown purpose. Reports of psychic anomalies, sudden disappearances, and unrecorded victories troubled the Inquisitor. Questions gnawed at him. Were these soldiers instruments of the Emperor, or of something darker, something older than the codices themselves? Councils convened, but answers eluded them. Politicians whispered, priests prayed, and generals bristled, each attempting to shape truth to their will. Yet reality refused to yield. As the cruiser drifted through the void, a transmission arrived, coordinates for a world that had vanished from the Imperium's charts. The Inquisitor's heart froze, for to follow would mean walking into a place where loyalty and morality might no longer hold sway. The world of Saren IV was a necropolis of war, scarred by centuries of rebellion and Xenos conquest. Here, the faithful found no solace, only labyrinthine ruins where the living and the dead intertwined in the stench of rot and iron. Squads of Lucifer, blacks moved among the crumbling buildings, their discipline unshaken by the screams of possessed cultists or the warbling shrieks of alien horrors. Yet even they were not immune to the tremors of doubt that emanated from the planet itself. Ancient shrines had been defiled, holy symbols twisted into grotesque mockeries. Priests and officers whispered of a presence in the shadows, a voice that promised power yet demanded loyalty beyond the Emperor. Soldiers reported visions, themselves but older, scarred in ways that had not yet occurred, watching and judging. In Saren IV, the battlefield was no longer only of flesh and steel, it was of belief, and even the purest loyalty was tested against truths too grotesque to confront. High above the planet, the sky was shredded by a tempest of warp energy, a storm that seemed to pulse with sentience. A detachment of the Lucifer Blacks ascended into orbit aboard shuttles that moved as extensions of the storm itself. In the void, even stars seemed muted, and communications faltered under unseen interference. A lone astropath reported hearing voices in the warp that claimed knowledge of humanity's fate, of betrayals yet unmade and sins not yet committed. Officers consulted with terrified reverence, noting that every action of the regiment appeared preordained, yet preordained to what end none could discern. Ships trembled as psychic tremors raced through hulls, and yet the regiment pressed onward, inexorable. The distinction between salvation and damnation blurred. Every strategy seemed blessed, every assault victorious, yet a gnawing fear took root. That obedience itself might be a trap, that loyalty could be weaponized, and that the Emperor's instruments may yet serve a hand unseen, guiding them toward ruin. Within the cathedrals of Hestivus Prime, confessions began to unravel like threads in a tapestry of sin. Priests spoke in trembling tones of visions imparted by the Emperor, warnings of heresies blossoming where none should exist. Citizens recounted dreams in which their protectors, the Lucifer Blacks, carried out deeds incomprehensible, acts that were righteous yet morally ambiguous beyond mortal reckoning. Political factions within the planetary governorate leveraged these reports, framing the regiment's unquestioned victories as evidence of unholy manipulation. Tension coiled through the populace, and faith itself became a battleground. Soldiers once devoted to the Emperor's light began to doubt not only their superiors, but themselves, questioning whether obedience was virtue or a weapon of oppression. In the shadows of the cathedrals, An initiate discovered a codex bound in unknown flesh, its pages whispering truths forbidden to all but the Lucifer Blacks. To read, it was to glimpse a fracture in reality, one that suggested the regiment's loyalty might conceal a more terrifying purpose. On the frontier world of Mirith Ix, an ambush revealed the delicate calculus of loyalty and treachery. The planet's defenders believed themselves prepared, yet an unseen hand guided the Lucifer Blacks into a position that seemed miraculous, yet unnervingly precise. Enemy formations collapsed before they fully understood the threat. Survivors later recounted seeing officers appear where no path existed, issuing commands that anticipated outcomes before they occurred. Among the corpses, cryptic glyphs were discovered, marks that defied Imperial lexicon, yet radiated a strange, hypnotic resonance. Scholars suggested these symbols could influence obedience, bending the will of men and Xenos alike. Rumors spread that the regiment had acquired knowledge beyond mortal ken, knowledge capable of shaping not only battle, but the very flow of loyalty and sin. Amid this eerie perfection, the question persisted: are the Lucifer Blacks champions of the Emperor, or instruments of a logic older and more ruthless than any god ever conceived? In the ruins of the once glorious hive world of Veralis, the remnants of civil order struggled beneath the shadow of the regiment. Priests recorded that dreams of the faithful had begun to align, synchronized in terrifying clarity, reflecting events yet to occur. Officers confided to one another that obedience had taken on a resonance beyond training, an almost psychic link, binding soldiers to the will of their Lord Captain. Yet whispers of treachery and heresy grew, originating not from the battlefield but the council chambers. Plans were subverted subtly, victories delayed, and alliances shifted like sand under the influence of a hand unseen. Those who questioned the Lucifer Blacks found themselves accused, ostracized, or vanished without record. The populace felt the weight of unseen judgment, and even the Emperor's light seemed hesitant. The regiment's presence, though a bulwark of survival, began to hint at a larger truth: that salvation may demand complicity in deeds that erode the very soul it claims to preserve. On the fringes of a shattered warp rift, scouts detected a presence that defied comprehension. The void itself seemed to pulse with anticipation, and the stars dimmed as if recoiling from knowledge too vast. The Lucifer Blacks deployed into this anomaly with precision, moving as if guided by some internal compass of inevitability. Ships trembled, psychers screamed in resonance, and the boundaries between cause and effect blurred. Observers noted shadows of soldiers that moved independently, carrying out maneuvers before the orders were spoken. When the detachment returned, survivors whispered of a revelation. The regiment had glimpsed something in the warp, a truth forbidden to all but them, a fracture in fate itself. Orders were given, victories achieved, yet eyes glinted with an unspoken horror. Even the Lord Captain appeared, altered, silent, as if bearing a knowledge that could unravel the Imperium. What they saw remained unspoken, yet the universe shivered in response. The final chapter opened upon the moon of Xyler V, a place where heresy had rooted itself like a malignant growth. The Lucifer Blacks arrived to purge the corruption, yet immediately, it became clear that the enemy's strategy was unnervingly prescient, anticipating every strike. Inquisitors noted with horror that the enemy's insight mirrored the regiment's own predictive precision, as if the warp had been corrupted by the same hand that guided the soldiers. During a ritual cleansing, a cadre of acolytes uncovered relics that should not exist, artifacts that combined Imperial purity with alien warp-infused essence. Whispers rose. Could the regiment itself be unknowingly entangled in the heresy it sought to destroy? Orders faltered for a moment, and in that pause, treachery bloomed. Soldiers of the regiment hesitated, unsure if obedience demanded annihilation or submission. The battlefield became a mirror, reflecting both salvation and corruption, loyalty and betrayal, leaving the outcome suspended on the edge of revelation. The chronicle concludes not with clarity, but with the fracture of certainty. On Xyler V, the final confrontation shattered expectations. A figure appeared, cloaked in black identical to the Lucifer Blacks, yet bearing sigils unknown to the Imperium. Soldiers faltered, priests whispered blasphemies, and the warp trembled as if acknowledging an unseen authority. The Lord Captain gave an order that no man fully understood, yet the regiment obeyed. Observers felt the universe pause, the cadence of fate disrupted. And in the silence that followed, the truth shimmered for a moment, terrifying, incomplete, and forbidden. Who had truly guided the battle? Were the soldiers saviors or pawns in a design older than mankind itself? As the echoes of war faded across Xyler V, one certainty remained. The Imperium had glimpsed a heresy within its own most faithful, and the shadow of that revelation would linger across countless worlds, unanswered, unchallenged, and eternal. The galaxy exhaled sorrow, a slow, mournful cadence that resonated through the void. Star systems burned in silence, their pyres echoing the deaths of civilizations long claimed by time and war. On a fringe world, a lone priest traced trembling fingers over relics scorched by centuries, murmuring confessions to an emperor who had ceased to answer. Around him, soldiers of the Lucifer Blacks moved in mechanical reverence, their obedience absolute, yet their eyes bore faint, unspoken questions. Each shot fired, each step taken, was a hymn tinged with dread. The priest felt the weight of entire histories pressing against his soul. Civilizations consumed not by enemies alone, but by the inexorable machinery of faith and war. In that hush between heartbeats, he glimpsed a truth too vast, too ancient. The galaxy itself was alive, whispering judgments not through gods, but through the choices and sacrifices of men, shaping destiny beyond comprehension, and even beyond the Emperor's direct will. In the shattered halls of a hive city, despair festered like a hidden infection. Civilians knelt in the rubble, eyes wide with a terror born not of immediate violence, but of anticipation, the knowledge that nothing could endure. Officers of the Imperial Guard attempted to impose order, yet the ground trembled with a presence unseen. Whispers of heresy, long buried, rose in the minds of the faithful, entwining with their prayers like tendrils of poison. Scouts reported movements in corridors that should have been empty, shadows that did not obey the laws of light, and fleeting visions of soldiers who had never existed. Among these, the Lucifer Blacks remained statuesque, their discipline unwavering, yet even they bore the psychic weight of what they witnessed. Within the minds of those who served, belief was strained to breaking, morality fractured by the constant brush with death and revelation, leaving only questions that no doctrine, no prayer, could adequately answer. Above a dying star, the bridge of a strike cruiser became a confessional of despair. Commanders whispered over hololithic displays, recounting failures that were simultaneously victories, victories that bore the stench of unanticipated horrors. Psychers trembled as the warp resonated with memories that were not their own. Histories folded over themselves like the pages of a book that could not exist. The Lucifer Blacks executed orders with precision so complete it felt preordained, yet observers noted the strain etched into their movements, a subtle hesitation that suggested a burden beyond duty. Messages from other sectors arrived fragmented, voices laced with fear, hinting at revolts yet to occur and treacheries yet unseen. In private quarters, priests and captains alike dared to contemplate a reality they were forbidden to name, that the fabric of the galaxy might be intentionally warped, a tapestry woven by forces neither human nor divine, with loyalty, faith, and obedience only threads in a greater, unknowable design. On the frontier world of Terren, the Lucifer Blacks confronted an enemy that seemed born from prophecy itself. Entire regiments of Xenos were annihilated, yet survivors whispered of impossibilities, squads moving before orders were given, weapons firing with the awareness of intention, and an uncanny synchronization that bordered on the unnatural. Among the human forces, unease spread as quickly as fear, soldiers questioning whether the regiment was an instrument of salvation or a herald of manipulation. Temples burned in unison with barracks, as if the world itself were responding to a command beyond mortal comprehension. Priests recorded visions of men who had died centuries prior, appearing to counsel the living in riddles. Even the Lord Captain's silence suggested he bore knowledge that could unravel faith. The warp trembled, reacting to the convergence of psychic resonance and human devotion. And beneath it all lay a singular unspoken question. If loyalty and righteousness are tools, then whose hand truly wields them, and to what ultimate end? In the hollowed ruins of Sandara Prime, memory and flesh collided. Soldiers recounted moments of déjà vu so precise it became impossible to distinguish past from present. Each heartbeat carried echoes of victories they had yet to fight, and losses that had already scarred their souls. Priests murmured that the Emperor spoke through the cadence of these premonitions, yet doubt festered in the air like a silent pestilence. Among the rubble, relics pulsed faintly, objects imbued with centuries of faith and war, now vibrating with a resonance that suggested cognition. The Lucifer Blacks moved as a singular entity, yet fragments of individuality surfaced. Hesitation in a shot, a glance exchanged that seemed to question command. Even obedience had become a weight, a burden of knowing more than the conscious mind could bear. And when the last of the Xenos host fell, a whisper traversed the ruins, not of victory, but of knowledge that should not exist. A secret hidden beneath the bones of creation. On the obsidian cliffs of Vera Minor, the faithful gathered, seeking solace in the memory of their emperor. Yet the light of purpose faltered, dimmed by an unseen hand that seemed to shape outcomes before prayers were uttered. Scouts reported untraceable movements within the warp, voices that echoed their own doubts, and reflections that did not match their faces. Inquisitors debated the implications, their counsels fracturing under the weight of uncertainty. Were the Lucifer Blacks defenders of humanity or agents of a deeper logic? The soldiers themselves bore no sign of corruption, yet each step and command hinted at knowledge that extended beyond comprehension. As the population watched, entire structures collapsed and rebuilt, only to collapse again, reflecting a pattern so precise it appeared deliberate. The universe had become a mirror of war, reflecting both loyalty and deception, faith and manipulation. And in that mirrored infinity, the faithful glimpsed a truth too vast to name. During the siege of the Forge World Arcanas, psychic tremors ripped through the command deck. Psychers screamed, not in pain but in comprehension. The enemy anticipated every maneuver, not by strategy, but through an understanding of the cosmos itself. Officers noted that every countermeasure had already been accounted for before being deployed. Among the regiment, movements were perfect yet strained, a reflection of the burden of obedience intertwined with cosmic knowledge. The warp's song was discordant, resonating with hints of betrayal sewn into the very fabric of history. Soldiers began to question if their victories were truly acts of faith, or the execution of an inevitability dictated by unseen architects. A single line of inquiry rose from the ruins. Perhaps loyalty and devotion were not sacred, but engineered instruments, a lever upon reality itself. And as the enemy was obliterated, a fragment of forbidden lore surfaced, a cipher carved into Arcane's bones, hinting at truths buried before humanity's first empire. In the catacombs of Xyler V, memory and heresy intertwined. Priests uncovered murals depicting the Lucifer Blacks alongside figures whose forms shifted like smoke, their faces obscured yet familiar. The imagery suggested continuity, a thread of purpose spanning centuries, as if the regiment had been present at events far older than recorded history. Soldiers' dreams reflected these visions, blending past and present, shaping their obedience with an almost predestined inevitability. Political factions on the planet interpreted the evidence differently. Some called it divine proof, others a warning of manipulation beyond mortal control. Amidst these interpretations, the regiment continued to operate with precision, yet even the Lord Captain's commands carried the weight of hesitation, subtle but undeniable. In the hidden corridors of power, one whisper persisted. The Lucifer Blacks may not merely defend the Imperium. They may preserve a secret, an architecture of reality itself, whose revelation would fracture faith and challenge the foundations of loyalty across the stars. The battlefield of Hestivus Ix erupted in violence that defied both expectation and strategy. Enemy formations collapsed before human lines had fully deployed, yet fragments of soldiers' perception suggested premeditated suffering, a choreography of pain and salvation. Psychers reported visions of alternate outcomes, possibilities foreclosed by orders they could not comprehend. Even the regiment seemed aware of temporal folds, of choices yet to be made, executing maneuvers that preempted events. Faith trembled in this convergence of chaos and control. Devotion became a crucible in which morality and obedience were tested against unknowable cosmic rhythms. High-ranking officers began to realize that victories may not reflect righteousness, but inevitability. A tremor of doubt coursed through the hearts of men and women who had clung to the Emperor's light for decades. The universe itself seemed to observe, waiting for the conclusion of a design whose authors were neither fully human nor divine. In the void above Veralis, the warp itself convulsed, revealing fractures unseen by mortal eyes. The Lucifer Blacks navigated these fissures with skill born of instinct, yet each movement resonated with knowledge no soldier could claim. Inquisitors and Psychers alike discerned patterns. Battles fought not to win, but to maintain equilibrium, ensuring the survival of a design older than the Imperium. Faith faltered as each revelation came to light. Belief became an instrument, obedience a form of preservation, not chosen but dictated. Even the stars seemed to hesitate, their light bending as though wary of truth. Amid the cosmic stillness, a single realization pierced the silence. The regiment's purpose extended beyond protection, beyond faith, into the realm of shaping reality itself. The galaxy, in all its staggering breadth, may have been guided by hands no human could ever hope to discern. On the surface of Mirith Ix, soldiers and priests alike felt the culmination of centuries pressing upon them. The battlefield quaked, visions of futures both realized and aborted overlapping in maddening succession. The Lord Captain gave an order, and the regiment obeyed as if compelled by the laws of existence, not doctrine. Among those witnessing, a single fragment of understanding emerged. Loyalty, devotion, and righteousness may have been illusions, woven to maintain stability rather than to honor morality. The revelation sent ripples through every echelon, from the lowest conscript to the highest inquisitor. The Emperor's will might be enacted, but not by him alone, nor always for purposes recognizable to humanity. Across the stars, decisions and battles had been influenced, subtly yet inexorably, by forces encoded into creation itself. And in the shadows of comprehension, a darker possibility emerged: obedience itself could be both salvation and heresy. In the final tableau, the chronicle exposes the ultimate fracture. On a world long abandoned, a relic hums with energy older than memory, reacting to the presence of the Lucifer Blacks. Soldiers approach, and the artifact projects a vision, themselves, multiplied across centuries, participating in events they had no record of, shaping outcomes and guiding belief. Priests and Psychers bear witness, confessions whispered beneath dying stars. As realization dawns, the regiment is not only guardian, but architect, an instrument woven into the lattice of creation. Obedience is no longer sacred, it is design. Faith is no longer comfort, it is codified inevitability. The revelation shakes the foundations of the Imperium, altering the trajectory of all they had fought to preserve. And as the vision fades, a single chilling question remains. If salvation is engineered, who is the architect, and what becomes of the galaxy when that hand grows weary? The void hummed with anticipation, a silent resonance that carried across shattered systems. On a frontier world bathed in dying suns, soldiers of the Lucifer Blacks readied themselves, their movements precise yet heavy with unspoken sorrow. Each breath felt measured, each heartbeat a ledger of debts owed to the Emperor, to history, and to the men who would never return. The air was thick with the weight of decisions made in whispers and councils, oaths broken quietly beneath the gaze of indifferent stars. Pilgrims and priests alike observed, murmuring prayers that offered no solace, for the galaxy itself seemed to mourn alongside them. Around every corner, the specter of betrayal lingered. Allies whose loyalty wavered, commanders who schemed in shadows, and enemies who anticipated each strike. Silence pressed against their ears, punctuated only by the distant roar of orbital bombardments yet to fall, as if the universe held its breath, awaiting the cost that faith itself demanded. In the ruins of Korath Prime, smoke rose like ghostly fingers, painting the heavens with ash. The survivors of countless skirmishes shuffled through corridors scarred by fire, their footsteps echoing against walls that had seen empires crumble. Here, devotion and despair entwined inseparably. Soldiers prayed while clutching weapons, officers cataloged losses with trembling hands, and psychers shivered as the warp whispered of future simultaneously impossible and inevitable. The Lucifer Blacks moved as a unit apart, a shadowy symphony of obedience, yet traces of doubt flickered in eyes sharpened by centuries of service. Ancient codices, long sealed, seemed to pulse beneath fingertips, hinting at truths too vast to comprehend. Even the Lord Captain paused, contemplating orders that would shape worlds. Each decision, each movement, became a fulcrum upon which the fates of millions balanced. The galaxy shivered in anticipation, sensing that the culmination of loyalty, betrayal, and unspoken sin was drawing near, and that when it struck, nothing would remain unchanged. Orbiting above the desecrated hive of Vera Minor, battlecruisers formed a lattice of impending annihilation. Below, civilians and soldiers alike clutched at fragments of faith, gazing skyward as if their prayers could alter the calculus of orbital bombardment. The Lucifer Blacks readied descent pods with silent precision, each Marine aware that obedience was not only duty, but survival. Psychers aboard shuttles reported tremors in the warp, fleeting glimpses of the cost that even victory demanded. Commanders debated, but hesitation was swallowed by the inexorable logic of action. Pilots felt the gravity of inevitability pressing through their vessels as explosions streaked the atmosphere in silent, deadly arcs. Amidst the calculated chaos, whispers of treachery and hidden agendas wove through the fleet, suggesting that even perfect discipline could be undermined by the fracture of faith. And somewhere, unseen, the universe itself seemed to tremble, aware that every act, every prayer, every choice would cascade into consequences that could reshape entire sectors. On the shattered plains of Arcanes, the ground itself seemed alive with memory. Craters scarred with molten promethium bore witness to battles fought and unrecorded, victories earned and betrayed. Soldiers of the Imperium moved through rubble with grief carved into their faces, each step a confession to the Emperor for sins they may not have committed. The Lucifer Blacks advanced as a living shadow, executing maneuvers that hinted at an intelligence beyond their own, a cognition woven from centuries of obedience and sacrifice. In the distance, artillery fired with a patience that felt deliberate, shaping the battlefield before engagement. Among the officers, a quiet debate simmered. Was the regiment savior, instrument, or agent of inevitability? Even as shells tore earth and flame danced across metal, a psychic tremor carried through the ruins, whispering of choices yet unmade and debts yet unpaid. Here, devotion and dread intertwined so completely that survival seemed a fragile illusion, a pause before the storm of consequence would break. Within the cathedrals of Saren IV, the faithful huddled beneath vaults scarred by centuries of neglect and devotion alike. Incense clung to their lungs like memory, each inhalation a link to ancestors who had prayed in the same shadowed halls. Priests cataloged reports of the Lucifer Blacks' movements with trembling reverence, noting feats that defied history, logic, and faith itself. The soldiers moved outside with precision, their discipline a reflection of obedience that transcended flesh. Yet even within the regiment, whispers of fatigue and doubt rippled through ranks, subtle as the tremor of a dying star. Outside, the horizon darkened as enemy fleets massed, their arrival foretold by the subtle warping of psychic resonance. Every prayer seemed answered only in silence, every hymn mirrored by uncomprehended omens. And in the quiet between breaths, the city's inhabitants felt the weight of the inevitable. A reckoning approaching, one that would demand the highest cost of devotion, loyalty, and conscience alike. Across the war-torn deserts of Terren, a lone officer recorded confessions in a journal that trembled with the weight of witness. Soldiers had fallen, and survivors bore scars not just of war, but of obedience twisted into grief. The Lucifer Blacks executed orders with an accuracy that unsettled both allies and enemies, moving as if destiny itself dictated every step. Cries of wounded and dying mixed with the silence of the faithful, whose prayers seemed answered only by flame and ash. The officer noted moments of hesitation, fleeting and invisible to the untrained eye, a reminder that even the perfect are not immune to conscience. Rumors whispered through the ranks, treachery in council chambers, betrayal hidden in the folds of command, secrets encoded into the very orders they followed. The sun set behind smoke and ruin, a dying witness to humanity's stubborn perseverance. Every choice, every oath broken or upheld, etched itself into the bones of the planet and the souls of those who survived. Above Mirath Ix, orbital cannons flared, cutting arcs of fire across clouds thick with ash. Soldiers looked upward, feeling the heat before hearing the roar, hearts synchronized in a beat of dread and resolve. The Lucifer Blacks descended amidst the pyre, weapons primed, eyes unwavering. Yet each Marine carried the shadow of memory, of decisions past, of sins confessed but unatoned. Psychers screamed into the void as warp tremors reflected the cost of obedience, visions of futures both claimed and lost rippling through their minds. Officers hesitated, their hands hovering over commands, aware that each order would echo across sectors long after the battle ended. Civilians and conscripts prayed, voices lost beneath the thunder of impending destruction. And beneath the calculated fury, a quiet unease. The galaxy had been reshaped by choices invisible, betrayals unseen, and truths half-glimpsed. The storm was gathering, its apex imminent, and the universe braced for the moment when the weight of consequence would strike. On the frozen plains of Veralis, soldiers huddled beneath broken skyways, their breaths visible in the bitter cold. The Lucifer Blacks moved like shadows against the steel and ice, each step measured, each action precise. Yet among them, doubt lingered, subtle as frost on armor. Obedience carried a cost, and perfection in execution demanded sacrifice not of body, but of soul. Scouts whispered of anomalies in the warp, of visions that suggested the regiment's victories had been guided by forces beyond the Emperor, forces that anticipated both strategy and morality. Political factions on the planet whispered, accusing one another of complicity in betrayals long hidden. Soldiers prayed with clenched fists, knowing that faith itself had become a battlefield. Above, the auroras danced with unnatural rhythm, reflecting the convergence of psychic energy, human endeavor, and cosmic consequence. The tension coiled, a living thing, waiting for the moment when fate itself would shatter the fragile balance of survival and purpose. In the catacombs of Xyler V, time seemed to twist, folding memories and present horrors into a single suffocating continuum. Soldiers recounted battles fought decades before they themselves existed, visions so precise it was impossible to separate reality from illusion. Priests cataloged these events with trembling hands, noting that the Lucifer Blacks were never absent, yet their purpose remained inscrutable. Every engagement bore the dual mark of salvation and damnation, obedience and inevitability intertwined. The Lord Captain moved through shadows, issuing orders with a weight that transcended mortal comprehension, guiding the regiment with foresight that unsettled both psychers and scholars. Outside, the horizon shifted, streaked with fire and smoke, each explosion a punctuation of consequence. And beneath it all, a truth lingered, unspoken yet palpable. The galaxy's shape, its victories and its failures, had long been manipulated by unseen hands, and the final act of reckoning approached, poised to transform all that had come before. Across the scarred deserts of Hestivus Ix, the air trembled with anticipation. The enemy massed, fleets aligned in synchronized malevolence, while ground forces moved with precision born of desperation. Soldiers whispered of déjà vu, visions of attacks yet to occur, of allies who would betray them before their first breaths. The Lucifer Blacks maneuvered with silent authority, yet each movement carried the subtle weight of awareness beyond mortal ken. Psychers felt the universe's pulse, a cadence of inevitability in which every victory demanded sacrifice and every order reshaped destiny. Commanders hesitated, knowing that the forthcoming assault would ripple through the galaxy, altering not just lives, but histories. Civilian populations shivered, sensing the storm of consequence as it gathered above them. And in the tension-laden silence, every breath and heartbeat was measured, knowing that the moment before the clash would determine not merely survival, but the moral architecture of the Imperium itself. On the cliffs above Arcanes, the faithful gathered, their prayers heavy with expectation and dread. The Lucifer Blacks readied for engagement, shadows in the dying light, eyes reflecting centuries of obedience and grief. Soldiers of the Imperium felt the weight of history pressing upon their shoulders, each decision a ledger of moral and cosmic consequence. Psychers trembled as visions of futures yet unmade rippled across the battlefield, showing victories and failures entwined beyond comprehension. Political machinations below whispered of treachery and betrayal, while the universe itself seemed to pause, a silent witness to the convergence of war and inevitability. The sky darkened with premonitions, and every soul felt the inexorable pull of fate. Silence stretched, suffocating yet pregnant with energy, as the galaxy held its breath. The final act approached, a culmination of obedience, sin, and revelation, poised to strike with an inevitability none could resist. Above the shattered world of Sindara, orbital bombardments tore the sky into fire and ash, yet soldiers below moved with uncanny precision. Each step of the Lucifer Blacks resonated with inevitability, their obedience shaping the battlefield as much as the war itself. Civilians and conscripts alike trembled, feeling the collision of devotion, fear, and predestination. Psychers screamed into the void as visions unfolded, revealing threads of history manipulated beyond mortal comprehension. Commanders recognized patterns impossible to anticipate, realizing that even their most careful plans had been subsumed by forces unseen. Shadows shifted in the corridors of power, whispers of betrayal echoed through empty halls, and the stars themselves seemed to pause. Every explosion, every cry of the dying, every prayer unanswered became part of a grand equation. And as the final moments approached, the universe braced for the strike that would irrevocably alter the Imperium, leaving all who survived to reckon with the weight of choices, sins, and cosmic truth. The void cracked with the fury of dying suns as orbital bombardments fell upon Sindara, streaking the heavens with fire. Soldiers of the Imperium ran across fractured streets, the ground beneath their boots shuddering with the weight of destiny. The Lucifer Blacks descended in silence, each movement precise, rehearsed, yet tinged with inevitability. Explosions erupted in fragmented arcs, shaking walls, rupturing souls. Priests cried the litanies of defiance, hoping the Emperor would hear, their voices swallowed by the roar of flame and the screaming wind. Every act of courage bore the scent of death, every step of obedience carved into the bones of the world. Within the storm, choices hung suspended, to act or hesitate, to obey or question, to sacrifice all for a glimpse of salvation. And as the first line of defenders fell, the universe trembled, acknowledging that the collision of faith, fate, and ruin had begun, and nothing could halt its course. Amid the burning streets, the Lucifer Black struck with precision that seemed unnatural, surgical in its perfection, yet imbued with dread. Enemy formations collapsed like brittle shadows, yet the ground trembled with the cries of the fallen, echoing across ruined spires. Soldiers whispered of visions, themselves centuries older, wounded and weeping, watching as their own hands wrought salvation or carnage indistinguishable from one another. Psychers convulsed under the psychic weight, glimpsing threads of inevitability that bound action to consequence, loyalty to damnation. Officers of the Imperium faltered, recognizing that even victory was not entirely their own. As the battle swelled, fragments of betrayal surfaced. Commanders whose orders subtly delayed reinforcement, allies whose loyalties were fractured beneath the storm. In the brief silences, the eyes of the Lucifer Blacks carried something no human could endure. Knowledge of outcomes yet to occur, truths unspoken, sins committed before they were conceived, and the unbearable burden of obedience carried to the edge of existence. Within the cathedrals of Saren IV, prayers rose as a litany against annihilation. The faithful huddled beneath vaults scarred by centuries, clutching relics and each other. The walls shivered with each detonation from above, yet the voices of the Lucifer Blacks outside remained unwavering, a counterpoint to chaos. Priests recorded deaths, victories, and visions of futures yet to be fought, scribbling lines that trembled under the weight of comprehension. Soldiers inside glanced upward, seeing shadows that moved before their eyes, reflecting strategies and outcomes not yet conceived. Psychers screamed with clarity that cut through the smoke. The battle was not merely for survival, but for alignment of history, destiny, and obedience itself. Every strike, every fall of a hammer, every flash of ceramite was encoded into the lattice of fate. And in that crucible, the faithful understood. Salvation and damnation were woven together, and those who survived would carry the memory of both into worlds yet unmade. On the frozen plains of Terren, the enemy faltered under the regiment's unrelenting advance, yet the battlefield convulsed with anomaly. Shells detonated mid-air, twisted by warp tremors. Soldiers felt time fracture, the past bleeding into present and future. The Lucifer Blacks moved with uncanny synchronicity, yet eyes betrayed the strain of seeing too much, knowing too much, bearing a burden no prayer could absolve. Commanders recognized the pattern. The regiment's perfection carried consequences beyond the immediate, shaping outcomes across sectors. Civilians wept amidst the ruins, watching men who were no longer merely men. In the skies, artillery streaked fire and smoke, arcs of inevitable destruction. Yet even as enemies fell, a tremor of understanding passed through those who witnessed. The cost of obedience could not be measured in lives alone. Every action etched itself into the galaxy's bones, every prayer answered in silence. And the storm gathered, dark and immense, poised to collapse across the horizon with the weight of cosmic judgment. Amid shattered spires of Virilis, the Lucifer Blacks confronted an enemy whose strategy seemed prescient, almost intimate in its malice. Soldiers felt themselves mirrored, watched, anticipated. Weapons discharged before orders were fully given. Psychers screamed, visions unraveling into 1,000 threads of consequence. Officers faltered at the realization that victory itself had become a mechanism, a fulfillment of a pattern that exceeded human comprehension. Prayers rose, mingling with screams, ash, and the cold of iron. Civilians were dragged into the lattice of fate, moving as pawns yet aware, their grief carved across their faces. Even the Lord Captain hesitated, for the final calculation of loyalty and sin unfolded before him. The battlefield had become a crucible of inevitability, a place where obedience was both salvation and curse, where courage and despair were indistinguishable. And in the tremor of each heartbeat, all who survived glimpsed the enormity of what was about to strike, the culmination of choice, fate, and revelation itself. On the shattered moon of Xyler V, the final phase began. Warp storms tore at the sky, screaming in psychic resonance as the regiment advanced. Soldiers' armor reflected fire and shadow, the glow of incineration painting faces lined with fatigue, devotion, and dread. Psychers felt threads of inevitability tangle through reality itself, visions of futures both triumphant and annihilated. Commanders shouted, but the words felt swallowed by the storm. Only the regiment moved with unerring purpose. Enemy lines twisted, disintegrated, reformed anticipating and yet unprepared, as though caught in a design beyond comprehension. The ground quaked, shaking corpses from their graves, and in those moments of chaos, the living understood that even survival was a ledger of sins. In the final heartbeat before confrontation, eyes met, prayers faltered, and the world itself waited, holding its breath for the culmination of obedience, destiny, and sacrifice, a reckoning whose consequences would echo across stars and centuries alike. Amid the inferno of Hestivus IX, the Lucifer Blacks executed maneuvers of perfection bordering on inhuman. Enemy forces crumbled under their assault, yet soldiers could not shake the feeling of preordained suffering. Explosions tore the air, shrapnel and fire spinning in arcs, yet even the violence bore the stamp of inevitability. Civilians and conscripts trembled as they witnessed acts of courage that transcended understanding, obedience executed with precision that hinted at knowledge of outcomes before choices were made. Psychers screamed against visions of futures both claimed and lost, bodies collapsing mid-motion into silent frozen tableau. Officers recognized a pattern beyond strategy. The regiment was shaping reality itself. Shadows moved in corridors, betraying secret loyalties and fractured oaths. And as the crescendo of destruction peaked, hearts trembled, for even those who survived understood that the storm had already written its own judgment, and the galaxy would never again be the same. Within the ruined cathedrals of Sindara, the aftermath of the battle pressed heavily. Silence stretched over shattered pews, broken stained glass reflecting fire still smoldering in distant skies. Survivors knelt, some weeping, others staring into space as if the very air carried the memory of every life lost. Priests murmured incomprehensible litanies, seeking solace from an emperor whose presence felt distant, yet never absent. Soldiers of the Lucifer Blacks walked among the ruins, their faces calm but eyes haunted, reflecting the weight of obedience, knowledge, and unseen judgment. Psychers shivered at residual warp echoes, sensing that what had transpired would ripple across time and space. Officers cataloged losses, victories, and unrecorded anomalies, aware that the cost of duty had reshaped entire systems. And in that quiet, lingering pause, every observer understood. The storm had passed, yet the architecture of fate had shifted irrevocably, and the consequences of every choice would reverberate through eternity. Above the fractured world of Arcanes, orbital silence held sway. The shells had ceased, the screams faded, and only the distant pulse of dying stars remained. Pilots watched as the Lucifer Blacks returned from descent pods, each movement deliberate, measured, carrying the weight of what had been witnessed. Psychers felt the warp's tremor soften, yet a residue lingered, a knowledge too vast for comprehension, a truth too immense for words. Officers and survivors shared fleeting glances, understanding that obedience had been both weapon and sacrifice, faith both guide and trap. The ground bore the scars of choices that could not be erased. The dead whispered their own judgment in the minds of the living. In the hush of aftermath, a slow realization spread. Empires had shifted, destinies been rewritten, and the weight of revelation pressed against the skulls of those who remained. Something eternal had changed, though none could yet define its shape. On the plains of Mirith IX, the soldiers walked among the fallen, their boots stirring ash and blood. Survivors of the battle cataloged the impossible, enemies annihilated before full engagement, civilians spared in inexplicable synchrony, and the regiment's movements reflecting calculations beyond mortal comprehension. Priests traced their hands over relics, murmuring confessions to a silent emperor. Psychers shivered at echoes in the warp, sensing that obedience, sacrifice, and knowledge had intersected in ways that would ripple for centuries. Even the Lord Captain moved with careful deliberation, aware that the storm had left imprints on both reality and conscience. Shadows of betrayal lingered in silent corridors. Threads of loyalty had shifted subtly, shaping the galaxy's lattice. And in this quiet aftermath, the weight of revelation settled over all. The galaxy had been altered by acts of courage and obedience, yet the full implications remained unspoken, eternal, and deeply unsettling. In the ruined spires of Veralis, survivors gazed at skies torn with fire, smoke, and distant warp tremors. Soldiers of the Lucifer Blacks moved with calm deliberation, yet eyes betrayed the burden of knowledge, of outcomes seen and futures shaped. Priests cataloged confessions, noting that faith itself had become an instrument of both salvation and judgment. Civilians whispered, sensing that their survival had been orchestrated by forces beyond understanding, their devotion unmeasured yet consequential. Psychers trembled under residual psychic resonance, glimpsing threads of causality twisted into patterns too vast to comprehend. Commanders recognized that battles won had not been dictated solely by skill, but by the regiment's presence within a design older than the Imperium. And as night fell, covering ruins and survivors alike, the universe itself seemed to pause. A single, ineffable truth remained. A hand had reshaped fate, and its meaning, its purpose, would remain unspoken, echoing eternally across stars and centuries. On Xyler V, the final hush settled like dust over shattered ruins. Smoke rose in thin columns, reflecting dying light from a war that had consumed bodies, cities, and certainty alike. Soldiers of the Lucifer Blacks moved through corridors with deliberate grace, faces calm yet unreadable, reflecting the culmination of obedience, sacrifice, and knowledge. Priests whispered litanies to no one, cataloging sins and heroism, victories and loss, as if words themselves could anchor meaning in a galaxy unmoored. Psychers collapsed to their knees, feeling the warp's tremors subside yet leave echoes, memories, and consequences stitched into reality. Officers exchanged fleeting glances, understanding the enormity of what had transpired. Obedience had become architecture, sacrifice had become calculus, and faith had intersected with forces no human was meant to comprehend. In the silence, a lingering vibration persisted, subtle and eternal. The universe itself had shifted, and those who survived carried the knowledge that all that came before would never again hold the same shape. The galaxy exhaled in hollow reverence, a slow, quivering lament carried across worlds scarred by fire and devotion alike. Ruined cathedrals rose like broken teeth beneath dying suns. Their stained glass shattered, yet faint rays of light lingered like whispers of forgotten hymns. Soldiers of the Lucifer Black stood among the ashes, their armor dulled, faces etched with grief and memory, carrying the weight of victories no one would record. Silent banners drooped from shattered battlements, their colors bleeding into smoke. The air smelled of charred relics and incense, of prayers unanswered for millennia. Everywhere, the echoes of choice, of obedience and sacrifice, trembled across landscapes of ruin. In the quiet, a lone remembrancer recorded the passing of the day, pen tracing lines of sorrow. What survives when faith is tested beyond endurance? When loyalty is both instrument and burden? And who bears witness when even the gods are silent? Amid the hollow streets of Terren, the remnants of life shuffled through ash, their steps tentative yet resolute. Buildings lay half-consumed by fire, walls streaked with smoke and time. The surviving soldiers of the Lucifer Blacks moved among them, silent, unwavering, their shadows long against crumbled stone. Priests knelt beside shattered altars, murmuring confessions that went unheard, their voices trembling like distant echoes. Everywhere, relics gleamed faintly, half-buried in rubble, resonating with histories too vast to recount. Psychers shivered at residual warp echoes, sensing the lingering threads of inevitability, victories, and sins stitched into reality. The wind carried questions across the plains, weightless yet undeniable. Had survival itself been a mercy or a lesson in futility? Could devotion endure when the universe had no audience? And as the survivors moved onward, dust rose like memory, settling in the hollows of existence, each footprint a testament to endurance, loss, and the quiet, unanswerable cost of obedience. Above Arcanes, orbital stations floated like skeletons, blackened and scorched, their fires extinguished but heat lingering in metal bones. The Lucifer Blacks traversed the ruins with measured steps, silent witnesses to centuries of bloodshed and service. From the void, planets looked like bruised eyes, their scars mirrored in the reflections of armor and the eyes of those who survived. The wind carried distant echoes, a rhythm of loss and endurance that resonated in both heart and steel. Psychers bent beneath unseen currents of psychic memory, feeling centuries fold upon themselves in the silence. No victory song was sung, only the hum of machinery and the faint cry of conscience. What is left when all who have seen war, who have sacrificed for unseen patterns, can no longer recognize the shape of faith? And who remembers when even the stars themselves seem to mourn in stillness? In the catacombs of Saren 4, the remembrancer traced lines across brittle parchment, recording not triumph, but the quiet unraveling of certainty. Shadows hung thick in vaulted corridors, relics gleaming faintly as though breathing memory. Priests knelt among shattered mosaics, their whispers absorbed into stone, unanswered and eternal. Soldiers of the Lucifer Blacks moved through arches like ghosts, silent and enduring, every motion a reflection of centuries of obedience and grief. The ground bore scars of battles that had erased histories, yet persistence remained, stubborn and fragile. Outside, wind carried the scent of ash, smoke, and forgotten prayers. Across the battlefield, banners sagged in the absence of voices, an elegy for all who had given themselves in obedience and endurance. And in the quiet, the remembrancer wrote the final line: who witnesses when all that is sacred has been tested, and who remembers when the cost of survival is greater than any god can measure? On Veralis, frozen plains stretched like a testament to silence. The sky, streaked with dying auroras, reflected shattered regiments and broken machinery below. Survivors moved slowly, each footstep echoing through the emptiness, a chant of persistence and sorrow. The Lucifer Black stood among them, figures carved from steel and memory, faces unreadable yet radiant with endurance. Psychers trembled at the echoes of the warp, sensing histories folded within the landscape, each crater and scar a ledger of obedience and loss. Priests lit candles in shattered temples, offering gestures to an absent divinity. Banners, frozen mid-fall, reflected the pale light of dying suns, a mute testament to the cost of loyalty. And the wind whispered questions into the void. When faith has been tested beyond reckoning, who survives it? When obedience has become architecture, who will inherit its burden? Dust rose, settling over frozen ruins, timeless and mournful, like the last memory of a universe weeping. In the hollowed fields of Hestivus Ix, the remnants of battle lay scattered, broken weapons, scorched armor, and silent bodies entwined with the earth. The Lucifer Blacks moved through the quiet, each step careful, deliberate, carrying histories etched into muscle and memory. Shadows of former enemies lingered in twisted metal, their silence heavier than the cries of the living. Priests whispered litanies into smoke, words unclaimed by the cosmos. Psychers bent over fallen comrades, feeling echoes of inevitability etched into every movement, every choice. Banners drooped, their colors faded, the weight of time bending fabric and meaning alike. In the hush of aftermath, dust swirled across shattered spires, settling into silent patterns. And questions lingered, unanswerable and eternal. What survives when obedience has shaped fate itself? What endures when all that was believed has been tested beyond reckoning? The field remained still, a cathedral of memory and absence, heavy with the scent of eternity. Amid the ruins of Xyler V, smoke drifted across shattered streets like a veil over memory. The Lucifer Blacks walked silently among remnants of life and death, their presence a somber rhythm in a world suspended between endurance and grief. Priests knelt before broken altars, tracing hands across cold stone, feeling centuries of devotion condensed into dust. Psychers whispered to the void, hearing fragments of patterns that had guided outcomes long forgotten. Soldiers' faces bore shadows of both victory and loss, each scar a ledger of obedience, each fall a hymn of sorrow. The wind carried distant echoes of litanies, faint yet unbroken, mingling with the scent of ash. And as banners faded in the dying light, the questions persisted. Can faith survive when the cosmos itself has witnessed everything? And when all that remains is memory, who keeps it alive in silence, unobserved yet eternal? Above Terren, orbiting ruins reflected the last light of distant stars, cold metal skeletons of vessels that had witnessed centuries of conflict. The Lucifer Blacks moved among them with deliberate, silent grace, shadows in a cathedral of emptiness. Psychers shivered at the residual resonance of the warp, sensing currents of inevitability etched into every orbit and trajectory. Priests cataloged fragments of prayer and confession, their voices subdued by time and loss. Soldiers traced paths across decks, their footsteps echoing through corridors lined with history, death, and devotion alike. Outside, the universe held its breath, reflecting the scars of obedience and sacrifice. Dust settled like memory, unbidden and eternal, over shattered altars and broken banners. And in the quiet, the remembrancer asked, when survival is won at the cost of comprehension, whose story is it to tell? Who carries the burden of knowing the universe has shifted, yet refuses to answer? In the shattered spires of Sindara, twilight stretched across the ruins like a curtain of ash. Shadows moved slowly, cast by fires long extinguished, as soldiers and priests alike wandered among relics and memories. The Lucifer Blacks remained statuesque, their silhouettes tracing lines of endurance across fractured streets. Priests traced confessions into stone, their words absorbed into silence. Psychers felt faint pulses in the warp, echoes of inevitability that brushed against consciousness like distant lamentations. Banners hung limply from battlements, symbols of loyalty and devotion, now heavy with absence. The city whispered questions into the void. What remains when obedience has consumed all but memory? And when faith has been tested to silence, who listens? Dust and ash drifted through empty halls, settling upon faces and armor alike, carrying the unspoken weight of sacrifice, endurance, and the quiet, eternal sorrow of a galaxy that had wept without witness. Across the plains of Arcanes, skeletal trees bent beneath winds that had survived centuries of war. Soldiers moved slowly, each step a confession to memory and loss. The Lucifer Blacks lingered among craters and twisted metal, their faces reflecting the quiet ache of survival. Priests whispered to relics scarred by fire and devotion, murmuring questions with no answer. Psychers bent beneath psychic resonance, feeling threads of fate woven into the earth, the sky, and the stars. Banners drooped in silence, colors bleeding into ash. In the hush of aftermath, the wind carried a question that could not be answered. What is the price of endurance when all that has been obeyed is etched into eternity? The plains stretched on, heavy with memory, grief, and devotion. Every grain of dust a fragment of history, every shadow a hymn for those who endured beyond comprehension. On Veralis, the auroras dimmed, leaving a sky of pale, cold light over ruined battlements. Soldiers traced paths across shattered fortresses, their footsteps a solemn cadence in a galaxy holding its breath. Priests cataloged confessions and whispered memories into broken stone, seeking solace from divinity that offered none. Psychers felt the warp's faint pulse, residual echoes of inevitability stitched into every choice, every survival. The Lucifer Blacks moved like silent witnesses, statues carved from obedience and grief. Banners, frayed and fading, caught the wind as if to mark a passage of time and sorrow. And in that quiet cathedral of stars, questions drifted like dust. Who bears witness when all that is sacred is tested beyond endurance? And when the cosmos itself is silent, what becomes of faith? Shadows stretched long across ruins, heavy with memory, grief, and the weight of unspeakable endurance. Among the ruins of Hestivus Ix, the last light of distant suns painted the battlefield with a gentle, dying glow. Soldiers traced paths across twisted metal and shattered stone, carrying the quiet weight of centuries of obedience and sacrifice. Priests whispered confessions to relics that absorbed the history of fire and devotion alike. Psychers felt faint tremors in the warp, echoes of inevitability lingering in air, dust, and memory. The Lucifer Black stood as witnesses, statues of endurance, faces solemn, armor dulled by centuries of service. Banners sagged, reflecting light that would never return, carrying histories that could not be told. And in the hush that followed the storm, the galaxy seemed to exhale, a quiet lament across ruined worlds. The final question drifted through space. What remains of faith when all has been tested, and who carries memory when silence is eternal? On Xyler V, a lone remembrancer traced the final lines of a chronicle in dim candlelight, ink trembling in rhythm with the heartbeat of a galaxy scarred beyond recognition. Outside, dust settled over ruined altars, broken armor, and crumpled banners, carrying the weight of obedience, sacrifice, and eternity. Soldiers of the Lucifer Blacks lingered like sentinels, their presence a testament to endurance and grief, their faces reflecting centuries of unspeakable memory. Priests whispered final litanies into stone and ash, their voices swallowed by silence. Psychers felt the warp pulse faintly, a reminder of inevitability, of truths stitched into reality. The universe itself seemed to pause, as though holding breath for the questions unanswerable. What survives when faith has endured beyond reckoning, and whose burden is memory when silence stretches across stars? And in that stillness, the remembrancer looked up and spoke softly to the void. Witness this, remember, and let your voice endure. Like, subscribe, share, and leave your thoughts in the comments.